addiction and working with them hand in hand. It's given me a different aspect on things also. So, but I was, and let's see, probably 16 years I was an addict altogether, opiate addiction, real strong for about 7 or 8 years, and I did heroin and every pharmaceutical drug you can think of. If it was a painkiller, and I could get a hold of it. When I was doing that, probably 8 or 9 years ago, I guess is when I was probably in the prime of that, and it was really easy and accessible to be able to do that. Heroin wasn't quite as big back then, but prescription drugs were huge, and had what they call candy doctors, basically is what they call them now, and you could just shop around, and you could go to one doctor and he'd fill one prescription, and you could go to another doctor and he'd fill another prescription, and there was no network, and there was no computer system that kept track of anything, and there was no pill counts, and there was no drug tests, and there was none of that. So the good thing is that since that addiction that I had, we've come a long way since then, I believe, and we've done a lot of things to help prevent that as far as the doctors go, holding them much more accountable, and with the drug tests and the pill counts and things like that, it makes it a little more challenging, but it's still there, and it's still accessible. So anyway, so for the 16 years that I was in addiction, broke everybody that knew me. I took advantage of every relationship I had. I ended up losing my kids to DCFS custody. I ended up homeless. Was in Branson, Missouri. Ran from drug court. Was here. Got put on drug court. It was opiate addiction in itself that got me put on drug court. Was not ready to stop. I just didn't want to go to prison, so I took drug court, but I had no intention of really stopping that, and didn't want to at the time. So after about 4 dirty drops and they were just tired of me, they were going to send me to prison, so I actually took off to Arkansas, and I left the state and absconded. So once I absconded, I was down there, and it just got worse, and then I fell into methamphetamine and lots of other addictions that go along with the opioid addiction, and that just continued until things got to where I was at rock bottom. And again, I was homeless, and kids in DCFS custody, and their mothers were in domestic battery shelters because it just turned me into an animal at that point. And I had warrants and fines all over the place, and Judge Ford was looking for me, and I mean, it was bad. So finally, 2013, I was in an ice storm in Branson, Missouri, and had just been literally wandering homeless, and I fell down in that ice storm, and I just wanted to stay there, and wanted to die, and I didn't have anything left. I was completely 100% broken, and unfortunately, that's what it takes for guys like me. And there's a lot of guys like me and women like me out there, unfortunately, but that's just what it took for me. So in that ice storm is when I gave my life to Jesus Christ. My first time I ever heard God speak to me, and he told me to get up, and so I did. And he asked me if I was ready, and I said, I have no idea how you think you're going to fix me because I'm a wreck. I said, but I'll start trusting you right now. So the next day I went to jail for 7.5 months. I got out. I went to a year-long discipleship and accountability program. The day after I graduated that program, the next right thing to do was to drive back up here and turn myself into Judge Ford on a $200,000 absconding warrant. So I did, and saw God's grace manifested through drug court and Judge Ford, and he reinstated my drug court, which was crazy because I should have went to prison, but I didn't. And so I graduated drug court, and then got called right back to the same place that I got kicked out of. So I started getting a desire to do something besides just tell my story, because I mean, you can tell your story and that can help, and I know that it does, and I'm glad to do it. But there has to be an action. There has to be something that comes behind just the story. So I just started feeling that, and kind of took a leap of faith. I tried to get some churches behind me to open up a recovery house, a faith-based recovery house. Had a hard time doing that because it was just kind of a shot in the dark type thing. But I knew that it was what I was supposed to do, so I went ahead and went forth with it, and stepped out in faith. And God put the entire thing together, the house, the furniture, completely remodeled, everything donated, house full of food. I mean, crazy, like crazy. I don't know if anybody's familiar with George Mueller, but it was a George Mueller experience. We prayed and it came, and so I knew it was what we were supposed to be doing. It's been going on for about 5 months now. And it has accelerated very quickly. The need is ridiculous. We get calls from Prairie Center every day, and all the way up in Chicago, and moms with sons in prison, and Pavilion counselors calling. I mean, and which is another organization here, and calls constantly for people needing somewhere to go. I can only house 5 guys in the house that we have now. So we are actually working on opening another house in the next 2 weeks. The problem is leadership. You know, a lot of times it's money, but it's really not money. We haven't gone with state funding at this point. It's just been religious organizations and concerned people that write checks, and the program is designed to be self-sufficient, where the guys work and pay a program fee, and that goes back into the program. So it's kind of self-sufficient money-wise. The one thing that we don't have are people willing to make sacrifices to step up in leadership and pour into other people's life. That's what we're missing, in my opinion, is the most, is people willing to make sacrifices. And I'm sure there's many among you here that are willing to make sacrifices and probably already have, I'm sure, but that need never stops. So again, after 5 months of being on the other side of things, and I'm watching guys come in the front door and out the back door and then back in the front door 4 months later. Not literally, because I don't let them back in 4 months later, but I'm seeing that process happen, and it's scary, and it bothers me. And the truth of the matter is that I could have $5 million tomorrow, and we could open up 50 houses in Champaign County, but if there's not people that are willing to invest in people, then it doesn't matter. It really always comes back down to the relationship, is what I have found out. So I can only invest in so many people myself. I'm a single dad, by the way, on the other side of my story. Got full custody of my kids back, and work a kind of full-time job. I call it my tent making job. I have to do something to generate income. So I don't get paid for what I do either. That's important to know. I don't draw a salary. All the money that comes into the program goes back into the residents in that house and opening up other houses. So I just so that's clear. So yeah, so from my aspect, it's what we're lacking the most is people that are willing to not to get somebody into detox and not to spend 30 days or 90 days with them, but that are willing to come alongside them and really start working with them on how to function in the job market and deal with real life and deal with spouse issues and deal with turning off the lights and deal with putting their laundry away like it's supposed to go. And because in addiction, I know, because I was there, and in addiction we forget all that and we don't know how to live anymore. And so we can treat the addiction, but if we don't get back into teaching people and investing finances and time and people into the relationships and teaching other people how to live again, I think that's where we see relapse at. It's because we have to have some kind of a bridge in the gap that goes from the 30 to 60 to 90-day program to a year later in life when I have to walk back outside and start dealing with all of these things that are in my life. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dustin, for sharing your story.
Sure.
There's a really important piece of it that I want to make sure everyone is aware of. How many years now have you been in recovery and sober?
In December will be 4 years.
Great. Dustin, could you stick around and take a couple questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Any questions from anyone on the panel for Mr. Brown?
I have one. Thank you
Yes,
for your testimony. It was incredibly compelling and just amazing. But everyone that has a story also has the start. So how did your addiction begin? Because the younger generation will say their parents' medicine cabinet. Other ones will say the group of people that they started hanging out with. So what was your beginning?
The real short answer to that was wounds. That's the real short answer is wounds. So it was the attention or the lack of that I got as a child. It was way too much responsibility on me as a child that I should have never had, and then that developed into rebellion because I couldn't stand responsibility because I had way too much of it. And so when expectations weren't met in my house, then it was met with a lot of abuse. Single mom, my father wasn't around. That was huge. I didn't know it was huge for a really long time, but it is huge for a man, especially for a boy. Not that it doesn't affect women as well not to have their father, but as a boy, I came to find out that there were some deep wounds there. So the short answer is that what got me started was trying to fill a huge hole that came from a lot of different places in my childhood. It all stemmed back to childhood. And my mom, single mom, entrepreneur, owned dress shops, cosmetic lines, bars she owned a bar on 2nd Avenue in downtown Nashville, and lived in a $190,000 house and drove brand new sports cars, and none of that stuff matters because she wasn't there. Because she was out building kingdoms, And so in that, a lot of wounds developed. That's the short answer.
Thanks again, Mr. Brown. Any other questions from anyone on the panel for Dustin? Yeah, Sam.
Thanks. Dustin, I'm from DCFS, obviously. I'm really glad to hear that you get your kids back eventually. What I was wondering was what was helpful in that process, and were there things that you didn't get that could have helped you maybe get them back a little quicker or make the process easier for you?
I have to be honest, it was really, beforehand, I heard horror stories about DCFS, and if you lose your children to DCFS, it's this crazy, good luck type thing, getting your children back. And in my experience, I really have to honestly say that was not my experience. Everybody that was involved in the DCFS process, from the counselor to the director to the caseworker, which I ended up having 3 of in that process, but all of them were extremely supportive and in my corner, and reconciliation was their primary objective the whole time. They were not trying to keep my child from me. They were encouraging me, and they would set something in front of me, and I would of course accomplish it, and then they'd set something else in front of me, and they really did a good job paving the way. So I had expectations, and I knew what those expectations were, so it gave me a really good focus on what I needed to do, and it worked because I got my kids back. So I have to say it was a very pleasant experience.
Very good.
Thanks.
Dustin, thank you again for sharing your story. I'd like another round of applause. Helping us kick off this dialogue today. We really very much appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. We'd like to turn now